Welcome to part 2 of Wire and Fire. The name, of course, is referring to the last video in which our dear protagonist, Roger Prince, has his genitals wired and coiled with metal, copper wire, and lit on fire, so it's really chestnuts roasting. So, you might think to yourself, God, how could this get worse? Well, you're about to find out. It always gets worse. Let's see. It is bad news, Roger, panted Dido, masturbating as she knelt with her haughty gash right before my eyes. Behind her, Grub danced, tweaking and tugging at her huge, distended clitty amidst her furry bush of wet, tangled mink hair. He's purpling nicely on the bum, said Miss Florence, frotting her spread gash. How just! He'll be as black as a cinder when we drown him. I groaned, unable to believe my ears. Grub said that they mustn't drown me before I had been punished enough to beg for it as an end to pain, and Dido agreed. The sun sank low as my remorseless flogging continued. I was unable to control myself, fearing that my final whipping would be at last delivered to my balls. Curiously, despite my terror, the hot wire maintained my penis hard. Of course it does, Roger. Of course it does. And Dido said an erect male was a fitting sacrifice for witches. I'm afraid, Roger, she said, no one will miss you. I shall tell the Major you had to return to Italy, and he will be happy to have Denton butter my bun in your place. Denton has a fine cock, and does like bum-fucking, said Grub thoughtfully. Dido and Miss Florence giggled in unison. Dido fetched a thick branch and placed it above my anus, then poked it straight into my bum-hole with excruciating pain and began to poke me in the arse. Dido continued her flogging, striping me low on the buttocks, and I thought I should faint at this double agony. All the witches shrieked with glee. I admit that in our previous sport I had indeed thought we were play-acting, but now the play was truly sinister, and I reflected on my situation, alone in trust, naked and helpless, flogged by witches, far from home. It is at such moments that the darkest fears assail the sunniest disposition. What if play-acting were at an end? Then a surge of hopeful desire reassured me that this was their cruelest and most subtle play-acting of all, and my cock throbbed mightily. Dido placed her swollen clitty an inch from my eyes, rubbing and stroking herself, and addressed me as though it were the clitty herself speaking. Just like at the end of South Park, right? Find the clitoris! You have only to speak, Roger, and your pain will end. That is, nod your head in agreement. The lash wielded by Miss Florence continued to stroke my quivering buttocks as Grub buggered me with the tree stump. Just curse all women as witches, Roger, she said sweetly. Say you hate females, and you will never again worship gash or clit, nor take a lady's whip. Nod to agree, Roger. Her masturbation was powerful and hypnotic before my wide eyes. Furiously, I shook my head in the negative, trying to groan the word never through my gag. Grub rammed the tree stump right into the hilt inside my squirming anus and began to twist it around, causing me to writhe in unspeakable agony. This is also another edition of Roger Prince Needs Medical Attention. He's a resilient guy. He really is. He's like Gumby, only with a lot more orifices to abuse. Miss Florence cracked the stock whip right around my buttocks to lash my inner thighs, a kiss away from my balls. Again I shook my head in violent refusal. My whipping and cruel buggery continued for some minutes, and again Dido squatted. I was delirious and half fainting with pain, and as she repeated her somber request, again I refused. "Well," cried Dido. My whipping abruptly ceased, and I felt the wooden dildo harshly pulled from my raw anus. "He won't play act," said Miss Florence crossly. Dido rose and, still masturbating, placed her fingernail at the ridge of my glans, where she began to move it round and round my bulb as though to cut me. At the same time, my mistress's fingertip began to rub my pee-hole, and grub returned to my arse pucker, but now with tender, tickling fingers. My honey welled in my tickling balls, and with a groan I spurted all over my mistress's and Dido's hands, with Grub cupping a palm below my balls to catch some sperm. The three witches rubbed my spunk over their naked breasts and quins, moaning again in their unearthly chant. Then, without a backward glance, they picked up their clothing without donning it. Nude and with their hands caressing each other's bare bottoms, they walked silently away over the grass. I hung there for hours, dozing and sobbing in my gas mask, cheered only by its taste of my mistress. Gradually the sun went down, and my wheeled body shivered with cold. I felt utterly wretched and bewildered. Suddenly, in my half-delirium, I heard female voices. I looked up and saw Dido and Miss Florence prettily attired in their evening robes. "Why, Roger," cried Dido, "what curious games you get up to! It's lucky we came to fetch my painting things, or we should never have found you." Gentle hands released me from my mask and bonds, and I was clothed in a silk-white petticoat of Dido's, then half carried back to the lodge with Grub in the rear, bearing the easel and painting equipment. But I saw that there was now a picture covering the canvas. There I was, bound and whipped by three naked witches, my bare buttocks and back quite livid with stripes, and labeled Masked Prometheus. So, art was made that day after all, and I pray for Roger's poor battered anus.